So I'm here with Scott Thomas, who is the design director of Barack Obama's online campaign. Scott, we just heard a fantastic, very, very inspiring presentation from you this morning. Thank you very much for that. Can you tell me a little about the campaign? Do you feel that the campaign changed the way that brands communicate with audiences online?
I don't think brands in general, but I definitely think political brands. I think politics had this idea behind it that it was always the candidate themselves, only their voice mattered, and I feel like for the first time, especially in American politics, we saw a bunch of forms of communication occurring that wasn't controlled by mass media. It wasn't controlled by even the campaign itself. It was the grassroots having their own voice, and that's an incredibly powerful channel. I think now brands are kind of tuning into what that means for them. It's interesting to see which brands have, Twitter accounts and which ones don't, and which ones are communicating on these social media networks and which ones aren't. I think to a certain degree, major brands are tuning into how that works and why it's important to be a part of that community.
Right. And in terms of the design of the campaign itself, what kind of key role do you think that actually played?
I think it played a fairly large role in establishing certain emotive qualities and in basically communicating to somebody via design. You can do a little bit better job of communicating incredibly complex things through very simple messages and using very simple elements to communicate a very, very complex idea. Something like hope or change or historic. Those words are very different, very difficult to communicate in words alone. And sometimes the best way to communicate that is through imagery. And I think that that's where design plays a really important role.
Absolutely. And going back to this idea of simplicity, which you've just mentioned, there was a really great passage where you actually talked about simplifying a lot of the interactions on the site, things like, and especially about humanizing the interactions with the computer. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I feel like we interact with a lot of forms online, and it's important for those forms to begin to feel a little bit more like a person. And for the questions that are asked to be human is very important, as well as for you to use logic in the same way that a human brain would use logic in order to have a conversation with the audience. And I feel like one of the major frustrations that we all experience when we're online is that sometimes it's dehumanized, where we kind of start to feel like robots online, and we're moving through forms as quickly as possible. And adding that human element, adding a part of the conversation that can be really human is important.
So do you think that the humanizing elements of interacting with computers is going to become a very important part of how we actually use computers in the future?
I think it already is, and it will continue to be. The more that we can make the computer into our own voice, it will help us all interact with it and hopefully make everything a bit simpler.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for going into all of that with us. Now, I thought I'd ask you a couple of questions about the conference at large. You've just come out of seeing Craig Mudd. How did you find that?
It was great. Just self-publishing my own book recently, I feel like much of what he was talking about are things that I have experienced, or similar things that I saw. He did a very eloquent job of reflecting on his experience using Kickstarter and showing the numbers behind that. I think for many people it's difficult to imagine how much it would cost to send a book overseas, or why Amazon is so much cheaper. And when you talk about large corporations like Amazon, where they're doing sheer numbers and reducing shipping costs and print costs, it's a gigantic and interesting question to figure out what is the future of the book. The book has been around for a long time. Letterpress started it, and it's been continuing ever since. Even the written word before that, where it took a long time. I don't think we've seen as much of an evolution in the book as the time of Gutenberg, where all of a sudden the printing press started taking over what the hand scribes are doing, right? That was a huge evolution, and I think we're right at that crux where a similar thing is beginning to occur, and books are turning into these digital artifacts that we discussed.